Good morning, AUSA. Starting in 1 minute, multi-domain transformation in the Indo-Pacific, right here at Warriors Corner. 1 minute.
Oh, okay. I'm on. Okay, can we get started? Okay. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm General Charlie Flynn. I'm the commander of U.S. Army Pacific. I'm just going to open a little bit before these three great officers here talk in more detail about the multi-domain task force. But a couple of points I want to make in the beginning. The first is this formation is the signature organization of the organizational change at the operational level of the Army. And, you know, a few short years ago, this was merely a concept, and then it had a, we'll call it like a draft MTO, and then it went into an experimental MTO, and now it is an organization that is got 4 battalions. It's got a sustainment battalion, it's got an integrated air and missile defense battalion, it's got a long-range precision fires battalion, and then it's got a multi-domain effects battalion and the task force headquarters. But again, it's the signature organization at the operational level of the change, the operational change that's going on, or the operational transformation and contact that's going on in the Army. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is the acceleration in learning and the acceleration in integration of capabilities, interoperability with technical and procedural elements is really crucial, because the learning that we're gaining from these organizations being in the Pacific, but in the theater Army and at the operational level, to integrate all of the other service components, lethal and non-lethal capabilities. So acceleration, learning, capability integration, and the experimentation that is going on while that force is forward operating, and it is gaining and maintaining contact in all the domains 24/7, 365. And from that acceleration, from the experimentation, and from the learning, that is also being shared by countries in the region. So, an example, I see an Australian officer here. The Australians established the 10th Brigade, which is its version of a multi-domain task force. The Japanese, I see them in the audience, they have cross-domain strike, they've got tight tall missile systems, so they are also, you know, cross-domain, multi-domain, very similar. These kinds of gains are being made in the region because, again, back to the signature organization at the operational level of the change that's going on with land-based forces in a theater that is otherwise, you know, known as being an air and maritime theater, and then is not. It's a joint theater. It's got joint challenges. It requires joint solutions, and the land power forces are an important element of that. And then the last point I'm going to leave you with is, yes, there are material capabilities and solutions, weapons, munitions, technologies that are coming. And while those are important, they are not as important as the organizational changes that are being made in the theater Army. And it's not just the multi-domain task force. This gentleman on the far left on the stage is Colonel John Harvey. He's the director of the theater fires element. We have a theater information directorate. We have a theater strike effects group. This is space. This is information. This is lethal and non-lethal targeting all brought together at the operational level at the theater army so that the multi-domain task forces can take the long-range precision fires from hypersonics to mid-range capability to PRISM, the integrated air and missile defense from IFPC to THAAD to Patriot to IBCS to LTAMS, et cetera, to include future vertical lift, sustainment capabilities, distributed forces, networked forces, meshed forces, cellular forces, all in support of the joint force. All in support of the joint, combined, and multinational force. And so the power of what we're doing out there, yes, there are material solutions coming. Yes, the weapons are arriving, and we're testing them out, we're learning, we're employing, we're deploying. But the organizational change that's going on at the operational level, core, theater, core enabling, that is the real secret sauce in what we're doing out there. That is the real secret sauce of what we're doing out there. Weapons are important, but weapons and material are not going to win. Organizational change is what's going to drive our solutions. It's going to drive learning, and it has an assurance value, given the examples I pointed out, at least between Australia and Japan, and there's others to go, but it also has a deterrent value as well. When you're out using these systems and you're bringing these organizations together. That is real change. There are concrete examples of this happening, and I'm just excited about what these guys are commanding, leading, and doing for the theater army, and I'll stop there and turn it over to you guys. Have fun. Good luck.
Yeah, thanks, sir. So General Flynn started out talking about the theater and transformation at the theater level at that 4-star headquarters. So to set the stage for the multi-domain task forces, what I would argue is the delivery arm direct out of that 4-star headquarters with the capabilities that bring. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to where we were and what capabilities we now have at the 4-star level that did not exist previously. So prior to 2021, the last time that the Army Service Component Headquarters saw any kind of capability added was in the late 90s when the ASCC was empowered with an S1 and S4 bolstered staff to do their theater, set the theater responsibilities. So then in 2021, you see the introduction of the Theater Fires element, the organization that I happen to lead. The interesting thing about Theater Fires element is it's completely cross-cutting in its design. The multi-domain task forces were designed that way as a unit with units that do that. The TFE, the Theater Fires element, was brought in by that way by structure. We were brought in to solve two problems for the theater army. One, the USARPAC theater army had a challenge to be able to do active targeting for targets of ground commander's interest. That brought with it about 40 military intelligence and targeting professionals to stand up the Target Development Work Center. The other side of that was that the Joint Staff's assessment for us to be a JTF, the headquarters, is we needed to be able to fight those joint and Army fires. That meant we had to stand up a fully operational Joint Fires 4, which came with the rest of the personnel. So for the last 3 years, that's been the path, was to operationalize those two aspects. But what we quickly found was there was more capacity there. And so in addition to that now, what you'll see, and what I'll come back to here in just a minute, is how we're now supporting and enabling the multi-domain task forces through the joint targeting process. But the Theater Fires element was just the start of what was to be continued change and adaptation at the 4-star level. General Flynn mentioned the TIAD, the Theater Information Advanced Detachment. That actually comes into structure at the 4-star level next year. However, we've already operationalized that ahead of schedule by converting our existing G39 information detachment and taking them and purposing them forward in theater to do the information advanced detachment mission set now with some addition to the Guard. And then we'll continue to build that capacity as they shape that information environment, as they help take forward all of the competition level targeting that has been done throughout the theater against some of our adversaries and elements. The third element that will come will be the Theater Space Effects Group, which General Flynn talked about. That's 2 years out. We will see a very similar concept to the TIAD. More people, 06 level detachment command that will be an extension from the 4-star command to go out and actually do. And that's the key that I'd like to leave you with today is, so now with these three capabilities, the TFE, the TIAD, and the TSIG, in addition to the existing cyber staff element we now can extend capability directly from the 4-star headquarters level. We do that through the joint targeting process, but more importantly, we do that either by taking the activities and actions that we can do directly with the authorities that General Flynn has and do those forward theater as part of deterrence, or we can do them to set conditions and partner with the multi-domain task force as they bring all of the capabilities that they have organically to bear. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colonel Charles Kean, the first MDTF commander, to talk about those capabilities.
If you could go to the next slide, please. Good morning. My name is Charles Kean. I'm the first multi-domain task force commander. I'm going to talk really first in concept, and then we'll show an application, because the ability to work in all domains is a little difficult. So I'll talk in concept real quick, and why and what we're brought to bear, or why we're here. You talk about the ability to apply capabilities in each one of the domains to have an effect in 3 dimensions: the physical dimension, the human dimension, and the information dimension. At the same time, our adversaries, or those that we might be competing against, are doing the same thing, utilizing capabilities in all of the domains to achieve effects in the dimensions. We're task organized and built in order to apply those capabilities within 4 battalions in 21 separate companies and batteries. I'll go through the quick description of this. And before I do that, I'd like to talk about the see, sense, make sense, understand, and affect. And I didn't talk about the find, fix, track, target, assess, because it's a little different. It's not just about long-range precision fires. It's about the ability to understand how our adversaries are using capabilities in each one of the domains to achieve those effects, and to be able to counter that to achieve a relative advantage. Now, we're broken down into 4 separate battalions, the first being the full build here. So I'll go from right to left on the slide and describe each one of the battalions. The first one's the Multi-Domain Effects Battalion, with a total of 6 subordinate companies underneath them. Space company, the ability to understand how we are using space and how space affects the land domain and how our adversaries are. The extended range sensing and effects company, you could think from the stratosphere down, and the ability, and the terrestrial layer, the ability to understand and sense the environment. The information dominance company, the ability to not only protect our own networks, but to understand how information is used in the environment. The signal company, as we're task organized and deployed in multiple small teams across the AOR, we have to maintain multiple networks at various levels of security. And then the military intelligence company, not only for the analytical capability that it provides the formation, but for that forward edge capability to pull down assets from the joint force, or intelligence from the joint force, or national means. Then our long range fires battalion. Capabilities, 3 separate capabilities that we have organic to our organization. The first is the standard HIMARS. So we have battery HIMARS, the ability to place those at various locations to achieve a positional advantage. The mid-range capability, we fielded one, we are fielding a second one now. That is the ability to fire SM-6 and TLAMs at a distance. Then you have the long-range hypersonics weapons battery. It's not just a concept, it's a thing. We have the equipment, it's in our formations. And then the ability to support that over long distances. The integrated fires protection capability. So not only do we have to see, sense, make sense, understand, and affect, we also have to be able to protect ourselves and protect our partners in the joint force. We're in the development now. What was originally designed for the integration of the Iron Dome system and structure is now transitioned for the application of the indirect fire protection capability. Currently in development and testing as we speak now. And that gives us the ability to protect against rockets, missiles, UAS, up to cruise missiles. And the forward support company there. And while in concept, it's the application of these capabilities in small teams across the AOR where the distance and ranges matter, where we're achieving positional advantage, we also have to sustain it. And sustain it, the application, if this is done forward, the ability to sustain it with our partners, with the joint force that we're side by side. And with that, I'll transition over to Mike Rose, where he'll talk about how we do this in a constant form of transition.
Thanks, Charles. Hey, good morning, everybody. Colonel Mike Rose. I'm the commander of the 3rd Multi-Domain Task Force. You guys roll. Hey, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our strategy to work the transformation. First, I want to highlight that the MDTFs are moving fast. But our adversary has moved fast and continued to move fast. So we have to accelerate our pace at every turn. The way that we're moving fast in the Indo-Pacific is that now that we have 2 multi-domain task forces, the 3rd multi-domain task force, which just stood up in 2022, has accelerated our learning based on the lessons learned from years of development ahead of time for first MDTF. We're synchronizing our efforts, and therefore we're covering more ground, and we're moving quickly. We're not covering down on the exact same technologies in every case, but we're figuring out how we can learn lessons from different types of technologies, different solutions, and then finding that best of breed and integrating it into our formations. We work across all 3 of the temporal timeframes for transformation that the Army's using. Transform in contact, deliberate transformation, and concept-driven transformation. Can you roll the slide? But our heaviest investment is really in the experimentation that we're doing every single day in the theater and what we've dubbed the operational or theater transform and contact. Now, it's not the exact same transform and contact that the Army's working, but it is our focus to get after those problem sets that General Flynn described at that theater Army level. And referencing back to what the Secretary talked about yesterday, fielding to learn is really one of the biggest components of our strategy. It's getting that cutting edge capability into soldiers' hands in formations that have an operational mission, putting them in the real world laboratory of the Indo-Pacific, and then giving feedback back to our industry partners, back to our developers, back to our requirements writers. As General Flynn mentioned, operational transform in contact has assurance and deterrence value, right? We are presenting new dilemmas by having perceptible capabilities that our adversaries in many cases have not considered in their planning. So we're working to introduce new things to not only to assure our allies and partners, but also to create those dilemmas. And that operational level, theater level, transform and contact informs our deliberate transformation efforts and our concept-driven our transformation efforts. And I'll talk a little bit about how we actually do that. So the MDTF says the Army's signature formations for transformation. We've conditioned our forces to rapidly integrate new capabilities through operation pathways in the environment. So operation pathways, as many have heard General Flynn talk about, is the way that the theater Army campaigns to achieve positional advantage in the Indo-Pacific. That is a mechanism and a vehicle for us to put new things into the theater in the environment in various different locations and see how they work. See, it gives us the opportunity to validate concepts. Non-programmer record. I'm just going to give you a couple quick examples before we open it up to questions. So we absolutely are invested in programs of record development. And these often are large systems, requires a large investment and acquisition strategy, not commercially available, often are kinetic systems and things like that. So a couple of examples here that we're working on. One is, Charles mentioned, the mid-range capability. So the mid-range capability, we've fielded it, we have put it into the theater, but we're learning less about how we can improve the next evolutions of that. How do we make it more mobile? How do we make it smaller? How do we make it more agile? How do we employ it most effectively? And how do we sustain it? A lot of those lessons are feeding back into our RDT&E and acquisitions professionals to improve and enhance that new operational capability. Another example is the Tactical Intelligence and Access Node, the Titan, which is both MDTFs have fielded a prototype of that. It allows us to, at the edge, integrate terrestrial, airborne, stratospheric, and space sensors and data using AI and ML systems to accelerate our ability to understand the environment. Two examples there. We've got space capabilities in prototype that are feeding into next gen that the Army will field and scale. And then lastly, we're helping with development of AIDP, the Army Intelligence Data Platform, which we need to be able to satisfy our targeting requirements just similar to for the non-programmer places that we're trying to work heavily inside the S&T and the RDT&E fields, informing what those requirements are actually need to look like into the future, but putting capability that is needed, that is available, and that meets threshold requirements today into the hands of soldiers, and then feeding that back into the community to improve what it looks like in the future. A lot of these capabilities reside in computing, things that exist in the electromagnetic spectrum, things that require automation and artificial intelligence. These are technologies we're invested in their development to inform what that deliberate and then concept-driven transformation starts to look like. So just a couple of very quick examples. From the extended range sensing and effects, we've got to be able to sense as far as we can shoot. Charles laid out that we can shoot pretty far, but we need to develop those sensors, those payloads, and the platforms to deliver them to close the distances. These are things that are somewhat unique to the multi-domain task forces. So our high-altitude platforms, high-altitude balloons, long-endurance UAS, in some cases that can stay aloft for several days at a time, station and provide comm relay, ISR, other command and control capabilities forward in the theater that otherwise would not exist at the ranges that we're talking. Bespoke sensors that are intelligence community informed, that may not ever scale, but that provide us some advantage against adversary threat capabilities. Those have to be continuously employed, assessed, and then improved as our adversaries evolve their capabilities. And one last note on capability that we're working on, commercially available and publicly available information as an ISR source. How do we integrate those available data sources to help us understand the environment, make decisions, and coordinate with our allies and partners? Both of us have exercised the combined information and effects fusion cell, which is our ability to rapidly share information at a classified level with our partners to help them with their all-domain awareness. We do that routinely in the environment, and Charles has a persistent presence out there doing one all the time. Okay, last note on allies and partners. So this is a heavy investment for us, as General Flynn laid out. We've got investment with Australian and UK partners, JGSDF, with Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, of course, Thailand. More and more of our partner interoperability becomes very important in this particular theater. The key terrain and the dependencies and the relationships and the familiarity is a central part of our employment, because the proximity to the threat is what essentially matters for us to be effective. On the last note on that, what we view that as a strategic advantage, the multi-domain interoperability that we're working towards is a capability that our adversaries absolutely cannot figure out a way to effectively counter. So the more we invest in that and our ability to work interoperably and interchangeably with those allies and partners with multi-domain capabilities is one of those strategic advantages that we're working to bring. And with that, I'll pause for any questions you have for any of us.
Thank you. Patrick Tucker from Defense One. I wonder if you could go back briefly to what you described as this Iron Dome anti-missile COAS capability. How much is it sort of like the Iron Dome per se? And also, are any of the lessons that are coming out of the Red Sea right now and out of Ukraine, how is that informing your broader approach to counter UAS and counter missile defense?
So I'll take that one. I'm not going to talk to Iron Dome, because Iron Dome, we no longer have the system. But it will be, in terms of our integrated air and missile defense, our IFPC capability is what is filling that gap when we gave the Iron Dome away. And then we're changing the structure to adjust accordingly. In the IFPC I talked through is currently in development, and we're testing it today. We have soldiers out there testing the system. And we will be employing it in the next couple of years as the formation grows. We'll transition from structure of 2 Iron Dome batteries to a structure of 3 IFPIC batteries, giving us 9 platoons worth of capability out there. And then in terms of lessons learned, absolutely watching what's going on in CENTCOM, absolutely watching what's going on in EUCOM, taking every one of those lessons that we could apply to our theater and seeing how it affects us. In a constant state of learning across the organization, from the theater down to the unit level, trying to understand, especially in the counter UAS and what's happening in the air domain and the littoral domain there, the air littorals.
Thank you. Colonel, thanks all of you for a great presentation. Colonel Rose, you mentioned the importance of working with allies and partners. Are you also looking at capabilities that the allies and partners might bring that could be experimented in exercises and then brought into U.S. capabilities?
We certainly are interested in that, and the way that we learn what's working well for them is through our pathways exercises. It's through subject matter exchanges. It's through bilateral discussions. So we're certainly open to that. I wouldn't say that we've got current ongoing efforts, but through our work together, we're informing each other's capability. This is not a one-way learning relationship for certain.
And I would just add to that's part of the advantage of having things like the TIAD, the TSIG, and the TFE now, because now at the theater fires element level, I can go forward. In fact, I have a partner right now sitting right behind you. I was just there. And in that, we are talking about their capability, our capability, how we need to get closer to information exchange, how we're going to incorporate them into the targeting processes so that as we move into exercises such as Yamasakura, that's months ahead of us, how do we do that integration at the targeting level and the execution level seamlessly? But prior to 2021, my organization was 6 people. There was no capacity at the theater level for General Flynn to send fires professionals, space, cyber, information operations out into our partners to actually do that kind of collaborative work.
If I could give one quick example of how that worked recently. So at the rim of the Pacific, we had an integrated operations center with our Japanese allies to integrate multiple different types of fires. And so, being able to interoperate, in a singular command and control node with multinational different systems, it really is, it's a way to do that force multiplying of different capability. Synchronizing U.S. fires, synchronizing Japanese delivered fires, as well as airborne fires with the joint force. I mean, that relevant example in the recent campaigning that we've done out there. We got a question up here.
Gentlemen, thanks for your presentation. Quick question. What are any of the TTPs that have come out of the multi-domain task forces that have bled out into the regular Army formations?
So I'll talk some concepts and how that applies, how what we're doing could apply to the tactical level divisions and below. And you could just talk about like how we're testing different capabilities, aerial capabilities to extend networks. And the ability to do this at the ranges that we need to do it for our operations over maritime choke points, you pick a location we're trying to achieve that. Those same ranges and the duration or the time we could keep those aerial platforms airborne absolutely could apply to a division and absolutely could apply to a brigade. So it's capabilities like that. Then our ability to fuse information or to fuse combat information, RISTA type, the reconnaissance, surveillance, target acquisition information, fuse it to make it intelligence, and intelligence to make it targetable, and targetable to actually do something about it. And working those, not only the networks to do that, to pass that information, but the different capabilities to fuse it all together, and then actually how you're passing it to somebody that could affect it, both non-kinetic and kinetic. So all those same techniques, whether it's network establishment, whether it's passing of data, whether it's the fusion of data, whether it's passing to shooters, the templates associated to it, all of that is applicable across the echelons of the Army. And just all the information that we're doing, all the lessons learned that we're doing out there, we're passing it not only to the enterprise Army to inform development transformation at that level, but passing it on through different forms to the tactical elements so they could see how it's applicable and then hopefully employ it.
So you asked about multi-domain task force, but obviously it's all the way up at the theater level, right? So, you know, what is unique for USARPAC is that we have a standing fires floor integrated with the joint fires floors and our partner and our sister services. But unlike the other two predominant theaters, while we're on our toes and postured, we're not actively engaged in conflict. So that gives us this really rich environment. I call it an incubator for kill chain experimentation, right? Because technologies can come in and out, and we can put them into the floor. We can create our own exercises. We can do these supercharged digital experiments where we've got MDTFs at one end, or maybe we've got JSOC or SOCPAC at another end, or we're coming all the way back, and we're pushing the edges of those kill webs and kill chains to find efficiencies, to find where tech can help, and then we're feeding that back through our support of Project Convergence 4 last year. Project Convergence 5 will happen at our headquarters. Part B will happen at our headquarters this year at USARPAC. All of that on a live network using live systems to track live objects out in the space that then goes back to the Fort Sill, goes back to the ADA Center, goes back to all those locations. But I'll tell you even more specifically, if I'll dial that one more, it's, you know, the mid-range capability and long-range hypersonics only exist in one place, and that's Joint Base Lewis McChord, and they only work for one commander in live space right now, and that's General Flynn. So our work at the theater level of developing those data paths, those discrete kill chains, what it takes to get an SM-6 shot off, what it takes to get a Tomahawk shot off, working with the BCD for airspace, working with the Navy elements that we do, all of that then enriches the information, the way, hopefully, to accelerate what's going to happen in Europe as they field all those same capabilities. So we feel like that incubator is producing tangible results that then go back either whether it's informing on a vendor, informing on a capability, finding a gap in data that we need closed, or providing an actual physical, you know, pathway chart, a flow of information that Europe can just pick up and go as soon as they have those capabilities.
I'll add just one other piece to this, and it struck me when John was talking. So it's really easy to do that, right? It's really easy to say we're going to do multi-domain operations, and it's going to happen. But the devil's in the details, and how you integrate all these capabilities, how you train at the individual level with the uniqueness of what we're trying to employ. You throw every experiment out on top of us. You try to figure out not only how to fly it, how to pass it, how to connect it, but then you transition that individual to the collective, the small teams. How do you employ it in small teams? Then you put small teams together. How do those two small teams work together? You throw them out in the environment. How do those two small teams work together, not only together, but with their partners, with the joint force that we're operating all? And then you throw in timing and tempo. So I talked at the individual level, the small collective level. Then you talk about timing and tempo of the integration of these capabilities. And that's the work we're doing across the joint force, through the theater fires element, through USARPAC, in multiple exercises, joint, partner, multinational exercises throughout the course of the year, where we're working through the specifics of every one of these plays, where we're bringing the teams together to work game plans, and where we're working through how do you do this over time and space in the environment. So it's multiple echelons of training, multiple echelons of rehearsals that is happening throughout the course of the year through operations pathways, through Army experimental programs like PCC, joint experimental programs, that we're continually evolving. We're generating capabilities, organizing to employ those capabilities, employing those capabilities, learning from it, rinse, repeat, keep going. And we can't do it fast enough.
Hi, good morning. Colonel Jeff Cronwitter, Air Force ISR guy. as I look at the things I've done out there in the Pacific and the interaction you guys have to have with the 613th and those joint fires elements, I mean, do you see fundamental changes in the way that the BCD does present the component? Like, what's going on in that particular operational realm?
So I'll talk it. I'm former 5th BCD commander. Year plus ago.
That is such a plant.
It was a plant though. But the so a lot of this is the definition. The answer to your question, absolutely. We need coordination similar to what the BCD provides with the Air Force, but we need it with a lot of joint commands, and that it depends on the command relationships that are established in the theater, where from those command relationships, who's the supported and supporting command defined. The supported command owns the timing and tempo, and then the process that they have in order to integrate all these capabilities to meet timing and tempo. It might be a numbered fleet. It might be the Air Force for a certain operation. And it's all how we're trying to create convergence to enable joint force maneuver, right? And it could be, so we're working it across multiple services at multiple echelons, but that coordination is important because it just doesn't happen. Everyone could say any sensor, any shooter. It doesn't, you can't sustain that over time, over repetitions, and you can't get things in position that need to be in position, just like the Air Force. They got to fly somewhere. They need to be in position. There has to be a plan for it. That integration happens at different times across the joint force. We just have to be a part of it, either us, the BCD, the TFE, and we're working through different ways to do that.
I was just going to follow up on that, you know, you may know this, but for many in the audience that don't know this, every single day there's a battlefield coordination detachment of artillerymen. There's soldiers from 500th MI out of the Theater MI Brigade and the 94th AAMDC. They do not work in my headquarters. They go and work in PACAF's AOC every single day. That plug of Army soldiers and leaders does intel fusion targeting, joint targeting, and they are doing integrated air and missile defense for PACAF. And so the point I'm making here is that is not a joint organization. That's an Army organization doing joint things for the joint force every single day. It's built that way through an Army organization to do it. Why is that important? Because what I'm talking about with the theater fires element, that's about 120 people. The Theater Information Advantage Directorate is 60 people. The Theater Strike Effects or Space Effects Group, that's another 120. I mean, the Army is putting an investment into the operational and theater armies at the operational level of war to do lethal and non-lethal targeting in all domains. That's over 200 people in the theater army doing the work to integrate these multi-domain task forces, which you see two represented here by the commanders, but there's a third one that's going to the Pacific. So these capabilities and these organizations that are Army organizations, but they're built to support the joint force. Why? Because the interdependencies of the joint force are required through land forces. Those land forces have to bring these things together. I mean, space, it starts and it ends on the ground. The largest consumer of space is Army forces, our land-based forces. So the point I'm making here is like this, we concede no domain in the Pacific. We can't lose in any one of them. So the strength that we have to apply, not just in the air domain, not just in the maritime domain, not just in the space and cyber domain, there is also strength that's required in the land domain to integrate all of these things. And the interdependencies of the joint force, they're reliant upon land forces bringing these things together. And that's the value, I think, of what we're talking about up here, and the learning and experimenting. And again, you know, when you're out experimenting and you're dialing in new capabilities, you're bringing new technologies, you're bringing new organizations, and you're going through concept development with new organizations, capabilities, and technologies, that's where the exponential gains are made in assurance because of the increased confidence and increased interoperability with our allies and partners, but also the deterrent effect that you have on your adversaries, because we need to keep them guessing. right? We need to keep them guessing. We need to be introducing these things, and we need to be changing our plays, our playbook, and how we operate every single day. That keeps them in an uncomfortable position, and that's exactly where we need them to be. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Have a nice time. See you later.
Thank you, U.S. Army Pacific. Coming up next at Warriors Corner, we will welcome Integrated Assurance, strengthening Indo-Pacific land power network and employing intellectual NCOs as the linchpin of interoperability, coming up at 10 minutes right here at Warriors Corner.